Okay, everyone, we kind of know the drill by now with these kinds of interviews. We're hitting the PR circuit hard with the good people from Blizzard in regards to hardcore servers. We're on the clock for 30 minutes. You know I'm going to speak at a million miles an hour, and I'll introduce our lovely guests. Thank you so much to them for being here. We've got first and foremost Nora Valletta. Thank you so much for being here.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure to meet you, and we've talked to him before. We're familiar with him. Josh Greenfield, aka Agrend. Mate, thank you so much for joining me.
Nice talking to you again, Josh.
You too, mate. Now, look, guys, so many questions, so little time. So I do apologize for how, seemingly impolite or abrupt or lightning fast I'm going to be as we zip through these ones. But let's get to it. Look, guys, by this PR circuit, starting up and everything, and the mystery about some information about what's coming with hardcore servers, I normally would never ask you guys this question because I always go, oh, well, I know they're not going to answer it. But I think for this one, it's a little different. Can I ask, can we presume that some form of formal information about a date is coming?
Yeah.
Go ahead, Nora.
Yeah. So Hardcore Realms will be coming to PTR this week on the 29th. It's Thursday. So mark that out on your calendars.
Fantastic.
Yeah,
Sorry, go Josh.
I was just going to say, we'll have a full blog post write up and stuff up probably tomorrow by the time you post this.
Yeah, I was going to say, I definitely saw that one that you guys have highlighted it via a blue post, a bunch of updates that are coming for all versions of the game, and snuck right in there. The little tidbit was a June 28 blue post about an update on WoW Classic. Look, just to quash any other excitement from players who are looking for maybe more updates about Classic outside of Hardcore, Agrend, is that update purely basically going to be surrounding this Hardcore PTR info?
Yeah, it's focused on Classic or Classic era / Hardcore this week. Yeah.
Okay. Now, guys, let's get into the questions regarding Hardcore. Now that's great information to have. Everyone will be very excited about the PTR coming. Look, what are we going? I mean, obviously, we're going to know what we're going to see in the PTR very soon, in just a couple of days. But if I can get you guys to maybe explain some of the decisions behind some of the things that people might see on the PTR. Have you guys made any form of decision on there? You definitely have been following this, the somewhat of a divide in the community between the concept of solo self-found that basically made hardcore so popular. That's the version of hardcore that people have been enjoying over the last 1, 2, 3 years, whatever it might be, that runs along with the community-made add-on, versus something that you guys have already said that you want to do, which is maybe removing some of those restrictions and allowing players to kind of do what they want, with the one caveat just being that if you die, you die. So if I can throw it out there, is there going to be any kind of split server option, any kind of way to access different rule sets? How are you tackling it?
There aren't any plans for that right now. And so where we're coming from is we didn't want to be overly prescriptive on what hardcore rules players should and shouldn't abide by. Our thinking was that players have the option to opt into any additional challenges they'd like to take on, and they have the freedom to customize their WoW hardcore experience in a similar fashion to what they had on those non-hardcore realms. The difference is that players can now interact with one another freely if they would like to, because every character on a hardcore realm is a hardcore character. So they maybe maybe I was hesitant to interact with or trade with or interact with the auction house because I didn't want to sort of cheat or undermine the hardcore challenge by interacting with non-hardcore characters. That's something that players won't have to worry about now.
There are also, kind of to build off that, there are a few things we're maintaining. For example, like the dungeons. I know that in the unofficial kind of challenge that folks are taking, you can only do one of each dungeon while leveling. Well, in our version, we're putting a 24-hour lockout on dungeons. Kind of looking at the challenge kind of holistically and talking to some of the folks that were involved in it at the early days. A big reason why they restricted dungeons mostly was just to prevent dungeon cleave leveling being kind of the optimal way to level. And we kind of agree with that. We don't really want people to dungeon cleave their way to 60. So we added a lockout. Now, once you hit 60, there's no lockout. So that's kind of a cool thing. If you want to go back and farm dead mines for your Hyacinth Macaw or whatever, you can do that. But As a result of that, though, that also means level 60 characters will not be able to go into the same dungeon with lower level characters. They're on basically separate kind of instances. So there's not really going to be any kind of like power leveling happening either, which we think is important for hardcore.
Okay, that's good to hear. Now, look, I'll give you guys a pass. You were ready for that one. You had your lovely prepared answers, which were fun to hear, but you know, it wouldn't be an interview with me if I didn't challenge you a little bit. So let me push you a little bit with maybe an unprepared answer, because I'm going to ask you to carry on from that. Having heard all of that from both of you, is there any concern? This might be more of a subjective question. Let's see how sort of much elasticity you'll have with your answer. Is there any concern that shifting away from what made this thing so popular will actually be a good thing for you guys? Like what do you find it to be? I don't want to call it hubris, but are you taking an educated punt that removing the restrictions will actually be better for the players? They'll love this more, as opposed to what they've been enjoying for a long time now.
That's a great question, Josh. When we were looking at this early on and kind of building this challenge out, we spent a lot of time playing the community version, talking to people involved in the community, and talking to a lot of the people who kind of helped sort of put the original challenge together. And what we gathered was a lot of those early restrictions were really meant to keep it fair in an environment where you are playing with other players that maybe aren't hardcore. That's not obviously going to be possible now because everyone's kind of playing by the same rules. And we also figured, to start with, this is something we're going to continue to watch and continue to get feedback on, but to start with, the more restrictions we engineered to the base version of the game, ultimately the less sort of agency you have. And there are some folks who might want to, trade with people or group in the outside world to kill an elite and not wait in a 10-person line, that might have a 5-minute respawn. And it's like, putting those restrictions in from the snap is sort of it really it kind of funneled you in one very specific direction. But we're going to keep an eye on it. It's just one of those things that at launch we really wanted to kind of let you kind of choose your own adventure approach to how you want to consume hardcore and what challenge level you want.
Okay.
Huge plus one to that. That is, I think that is something that it's important for us to allow players to still customize their experience in that way. One of the things I noticed personally, sifting through all the hardcore feedback, was a lot of different players have a lot of different opinions on how hardcore should be implemented. And so our hope was to try to strategize around preserving fairness, preserving the spirit of the challenge, while also giving players that option to opt into those additional challenges if they so choose.
Okay. I'm going to do one more push and then we'll get to the easies. I'll take the foot off the accelerator soon, I promise. Don't stress, guys. I'll have an easy question for you after this one, but just to continue and then wrap up this line of conversation. Because another question I had from a listener, Wacklow, who you might have seen around the Discord, Grand, was asking the following. He was sort of saying, in as nice a fashion as possible, saying, similar to what I was bringing up, hardcore was very, very popular. It was going really well with this amazing community-driven add-on. So and I feel horrible asking this question because the obvious answer is we're so grateful and thankful for you guys for making this. It's so rare for devs to take on a community initiative and make it actually a part of the game. So full kudos to you and the team for actually putting your ear to the ground and doing this. But in saying that, it's a weird sort of half... Why? Was it an issue with the add-on that you guys had in all the playing that you did of it? Was it like, oh, we could add this and we could add this and, griefing is terrible. We've got to get rid of that. Oh, look at all these players lining up for mobs. We can do something about that. So it's sort of, in the nicest way possible. Why?
I think from my perspective, I think we're trying to improve upon the experience. We were looking at those situations of like, oh, there's a lot of players lining up in this mob. Oh, sometimes players accidentally right-click on another player and flag themselves for PvP when they didn't mean to, and then they get killed. Like there were a bunch of things that we looked at, and we were like, we might be able to do something not to, I guess, like replace the existing hardcore challenge, but to like make it better, to try and support it officially.
To expand on that a little bit too, it's World of Warcraft is a massively multiplayer online game, right? And as a result, there are certain sort of social constructs within WoW that make it WoW. When looking at things like removing the auction house or removing trading or removing access to the mailbox, it's like it gives us pause as developers and sort of custodians of the game to omit those large kind of social features, and so a lot of those things that form a lot of the fabric of how MMOs work. And there's also some things that are just a little bit logistically challenging, like how do you prevent grouping in the outside world but not dungeons, because you can't zone into dungeons unless you're in a group. So I'm not saying there's no engineering solve to that, I'm sure there is, but it was just one of those things that we wanted to have a light touch to start with, really. Like, we have a tremendous amount of respect for the hardcore add-on. Like we've used it. Some people are probably still going to use it. I fully expect to see solo self-found guilds form up on these realms, and we think that's great. We think that's totally cool. But I think early on too, we don't really want to bifurcate the player base too much. Like we want to see how we want to make official realms, but splitting between a bunch of different rule sets straight from the start just didn't quite feel like the right approach. But we'll keep an eye on things. We'll see how things go as time passes.
All right. Sorry, you see me feverishly taking notes. That's if I have the time later to follow up. Look, let's get to the easy stuff. I'm sorry, Nora, if Josh warned you about me, I can be a bit like that at times. Look, Nora, let's throw you the easy ones and we'll get Josh in on these as well to warm it up a little bit. Look, how is there going to be an official race to 60 or something fun along those lines? That anything you guys have planned that would separate you from what we've done before?
We don't have any official Race to 60 support planned at the moment. We do look forward to whatever the community hatches up in order to, I'm sure there will be a Race to 60, and I'm excited to watch it. There's a couple things that might help people journey to 60. For example, Hardcore Realms will be PvE, and we've put some measures in place to help make sure that players, when players engage in PvP, they're doing so intentionally rather than on accident. So yeah, I'm not sure if you want to add anything onto that, Josh.
Yeah, sure. I think one of the things that's going to be kind of interesting about, and this is, I'll say this and it'll be a little controversial, I think, hopefully until I explain it. But one aspect of these realms is that actually all the content will be unlocked from the beginning. There won't be phases like, Blackwing Lair and AQ40 and Nax and stuff. It'll just be all open. And, when we first started thinking about developing these realms, we all kind of were like, yeah, sure, of course we'll do the content phases. Why not? But as we thought about it, we're like, wait a minute, honestly, one of the kind of challenges that we face sometimes is like a new content phase will release in Wrath of the Lich King or Original Classic or Burning Crusade. People will post on forums, is it too late for me to start? And it's like, well, of course it's not. But it is definitely a psychological impact of feeling behind. And the way we think of hardcore is that it's worked great for the last few years on the Era Realms. It's kind of just like an evergreen thing that just exists that you can sort of jump in and out of as you sort of please. I play mostly just on the weekends, and it felt really good to do that. I didn't feel like I had an obligation to get to 60 and do a bunch, get my pre-raid bisque for, all that stuff. And so since most of the content that unlocks over time is in-game focus, we just felt like it would be better to remove that from the equation. But there are definitely some people who will want to challenge themselves to see how fast they can get to max level, how fast they can clear raids. And I think we're actually going to see probably one of the most interesting and exciting, I hesitate to call it a race. It's like a marathon of people how long will it take to get not just to Molten Core? Molten Core was cleared in 5 days when original 2019 Classic came out. And so that's cool. But, it's really cool. How fast can you do Kel'Thuzad? On a hardcore realm with a fresh economy and everything like that, because as we know, just because you can do something doesn't mean you should in a world where you have one life. So it should be interesting to watch.
I hesitate to call it a race. Every Olympic marathon runner just died a little inside hearing you say that.
I meant it's just a marathon. It's going to be a very long race.
Just ribbing you, mate. All right, look, more fun stuff. How about this one from listener Potato Boy, who asks, look, is Blizzard adding any fun flavor mechanics for hardcore? We haven't heard anything about whether or not you're doing the gravestones that maybe, don't despawn or are there temporarily. The famous last words, everyone loves that. Anything regarding, having a bit of fun with a player death.
While we don't have any famous last words, which, it was one of my favorite features as well of the add-on, there will be death announcements for players within your guild. So if somebody in your guild dies, you can still, pay respects. There will also be server-wide level 60 broadcasts. So you'll be notified whenever someone anywhere in the world dings 60. Another thing is, this is a really fun one having to do with duel to the death. There's something we're calling string of ears. It's a feature where should you emerge triumphant from a duel to the death, a visual indicator on your character will track your victories for the world to see. So you can see exactly how many people you've defeated in combat, one-on-one combat. And it's just flavor. It's a buff with no beneficial effects, but it's bragging rights, which matters.
Okie dokie. Look, here's an interesting one. I'd call it a neutral question as opposed to a fun or a hard one. Given the nature of hardcore and how upsetting it might be for a player to lose their character to a disconnect or something like that, I feel stupid asking this question, but I still feel like it needs to be asked, and it's a right one to put forward. Is there anything on the back end, any, hyper intense technical thing that would fly way over my head that's possibly being done with these servers that would differentiate them from others to enable to give players a little bit of a sense of security that maybe they will be, protected somewhat against a death to a disconnect?
That's a great question as well, Josh. I think it would be disingenuous for me to say that there will be no disconnect deaths or there will be no unexpected network problems and things like that. That's just not the nature of online games. And whenever you create a character, you have to agree to that no matter for what reason, when this character's gone, it's gone. However, there are a few things we're doing to help mitigate that and reduce it a little bit. I can't get into super deep details on all these because I don't want to inform people about how to exploit the game or anything like that. But we have done a few things to make it so that you're out of the game a little bit faster when you disconnect. Also, if you happen to disconnect on a flight path, I know sometimes there's an issue on Arrow right now where you may hit a zone boundary and you may fall. If you're disconnect offline while your path is still going and your character's still in the world. We've also put in some tech to essentially teleport you to safety if that happens, so you don't either drop to your death or drop I had a character drop into the middle of blasted lands at level 20. It's okay, I'm not gonna live through that. So we have stuff for that. We've also we're going to be kind of trying to reinforce, the servers as much as we can for things like this. But again, it's one of those things that you are going to kind of need to proceed at your own risk. That's how hardcore has always worked in any online game, Diablo, in also, the era unofficial realms and stuff. So but we're doing our very best to try and find and improve and make little tweaks where we can to make it a little bit safer.
Okay. Another fun one for you, sort of. Look, real quick, PvP, is it going to be, in terms of battlegrounds and things like that, is this going to be enabled on the server? And obviously I understand no one's really going to be engaging with it, but is it there? And is there any plans around somehow introducing that into, however you would, I don't know, into the hardcore live?
War games will be enabled, so players can still stage battlegrounds against each other, but the hardcore rule set will still apply. So deaths are final. I think it would be a really interesting event to watch should players choose to engage with it.
Yeah, the battlegrounds themselves will be disabled, like normal random battlegrounds. We got a lot of feedback, and we agree with this, that being able to get PvP rewards and stuff, honestly, will just encourage non-participation. People will just AFK at the back of Alterac Valley in order to get rep to get their ice barb spear or Don Julio's ring and stuff, and we don't want that. So you won't be able to queue for battlegrounds, but as Nora said, war games will be enabled. We've also Nora alluded to this earlier, but we're also making adjustments to PvP flagging. Currently in normal classic era, if a character's PvP flagged and you right click them, you'll get flagged and you'll attack them. This is kind of used as a cheeky way to sometimes trick people into being flagged, standing on Flight Master, standing on mining nodes, stuff like that. But now you will need to type /PvP to become PvP flagged in a situation like that. If you run, headfirst into Orgrimmar as an Alliance player, you're going to get PvP flagged by the guards. But in normal, like outdoor situations, if there's someone just running around flagged, you won't be able to accidentally get flagged from them.
Okay, beautiful. You ready for the hard one?
Sure.
Okay. This is where the PR team's ears prick up. It's not that bad, guys. But look, I've asked stuff like this in the past, and we've had some interesting conversations about it. Look, I think it's fair to say that we alluded to it earlier, but let's dive in a bit more. I think it's fair to say that the decision to enable auction housing and enable trading was somewhat of a controversial one. The player base has been discussing that rather in depth on the subreddit and the Discords and whatnot over the last couple of months now. The main reason I would suggest behind the controversy is what the enabling of such features may bring along with it in tow. Now, I've talked a bit about this on my show. I'm of a certain belief. Some people agree, some people disagree. I seem to think, and I'm of the opinion that it's an inevitability that these will bring along with it some of the more negative aspects of the game, being, excessive botting and excessive third-party gold selling, an aspect of hardcore that we haven't experienced before because gold had no value with what we've been playing because it's not how it worked. Now, all of a sudden, it very much so will have value. Now, I know that you guys will say, and I agree with you, that to some aspect, botting is an inevitability of MMORPGs anyway, Josh, and you'd be correct in saying that. But what are you doing are you concerned about creaking open that door and inviting that aspect of the game in?
It's always kind of a concern. There's always, we don't like that. We don't like that sort of aspect or impact that has on the game. I wouldn't say we're worried about it. Hardcore it's a very different environment when everyone on the realm is playing by the same rules. You have a 24-hour dungeon lockout for characters that are leveling, and even at 60, it's not necessarily trivial to get to 60 and farm a dungeon like Maradon or Stratholme or something, where there may be, that's where there may be bot activity. We've done a lot of cheeky things over the years, and we're going to continue to do that to sort of put in safeguards against, I don't know. I can't really talk about it because I don't want to expose what we've done, but we have things in dungeons that will alert us or maybe even kill characters that are going outside the bounds and doing what they're not supposed to do. So I'm not super concerned. We definitely want to take a look or keep an eye on it as time goes by, and evaluate what the impact is. But also in a world where your character dies and all your gold and any active auctions, anything sitting in your mailbox also goes with you, and it's just gone. The appeal of buying gold and doing all that seems really sketchy to me. Like you may die and lose everything that you have.
There's obvious workarounds to that, though. Not to get into it, but yeah.
Yeah, of course. But anyway, I wouldn't say that it's not a concern. It's always a concern. That we spend an enormous amount of time and resources trying to kind of combat that stuff, and we're going to continue to do so. But we're going to watch it really closely as the realms come up and they get going.
Okay. Now I'll move on. Nora, unless you had anything, did Josh cover that well enough? Are we happy to move on?
I think he did.
Okay, all good.
We'll just
all
keep
good.
monitoring. Yeah.
I'm literally, if you guys, they won't be able to see me on YouTube or whatever, but I'm literally dressed to go. Like I'm going to work straight away after this.
You look very dapper.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's just for Nora's benefit. I'm going to my job as a criminal defense attorney after this. So these questions, they're not out of character for me. And Josh kind of knows the drill, thankfully. Look, guys, so I'll move on to the next one. This is a bit more fun. I want to know, as much as you can tell me, give me all the gory details, warts and all and everything. I want to hear the internal debate about the petrification flask issue. Seriously, like, this hasn't been another controversial one, but I would say in the more fun column as opposed to what we were just talking about earlier. I'm really in... we're split in two camps. I'm keen to know where you guys fell. Tell us how close, what's happening and how close we were to getting a different result.
This is probably the hottest debate we've had amongst ourselves. I personally have gone back and forth on this more times than I can count. Like, we should remove it, just get it out of there, or no, we need it for X, Y, Z reason. But I think where we ended up landing was we're not going to make any adjustments for launch right now, but we're going to watch it really closely. I'm sure we've all watched streams and things like that of people playing in like in a raid, and somebody gets aggro and they pop a petrification flask. And seeing it home as a viewer to that activity, you might have some feelings like, oh, that's cheap. But it's just like, these people have put a lot of time into these characters. And, I think the more accurate real world example of why having some sort of protection against, just a bad time might be in order is like, say you're Bob the Hunter who leveled to 60 and you went to your first Molten Core with your guild, and you back into an extra pack of mobs or something like that, and you start basically overpull and start a chain reaction and people start dying.
I knew, sorry, can I just interrupt? I knew you wrote that email that I saw.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So say, sorry, I guess that was my example. But say that happens, you're going to feel terrible about that if you're Bob the Hunter. If you've ever been in a dungeon group in hardcore when someone dies, it is the most gut-wrenching feeling in the world. And, petrification flasks, they're not trivial to get. Like, what we're seeing a lot of right now is we're in an era with enormous resources that have existed for years. And a lot of people have amassed a lot of resources, both within hardcore and without. I think, everyone expects that the resources that people put into their hardcore characters on official realms were gotten legitimately, but there may be some amount of those that weren't. But in an environment where everyone's starting from zero, everyone has to level alchemy. They got to find the recipe. They have to farm the Black Lotus, which won't be trivial. It might not be quite the ubiquitous problem that maybe we expect it to be. Also, there's a lot of folks who are kind of speculating about this, and I think some of the biggest proponents for removing it are folks who maybe. I don't want to minimize anyone's experience, but some folks may not have actually gotten a lot of characters to 60, or they have gotten a lot of characters to 60 and they're very comfortable doing that. Other folks might be content creators who play the game for a living, and they when they die, it's content. But for normal players, having some sort of out is not something that we're completely allergic to, just to prevent those situations where someone just makes a mistake. And, if half your guild dies in that situation and they don't have alts waiting to go, your guild might just disband at that point. So anyway, I don't want to say that we're totally okay with this being used carte blanche forever, but it's something we're just going to have to keep a really close eye on.
In general, we really like the texture of powerful items in World of Warcraft that feel super unique. And so we didn't want to err on the side of being too heavy-handed by restricting or altering the usage of the Flask of Petrification. As Josh said, the availability of Black Lotus on a hardcore server, we are imagining will probably be different to that of a regular Classic Era server.
All right. One last question, if that's okay, guys. Hopefully just a couple more minutes here. This is the last one, I promise. Look, I have to ask this. Have fun with this one as you see fit. This is a bit of an adapted question from a listener, Change Fatigue, who asked, look, guys, there's been lots of feedback around the experience about how it's been the closest thing to recapturing the original WoW experience that we all know and love. And I've added in the following flavor text, it's interesting, Josh, that I laughed a little bit when you made the comment about bifurcating the player base earlier, because we're now about to enter a world where we've got hardcore coming. Yeah, we've got hardcore coming. Yeah. We've got era. We've got Wrath maybe turning into Kata. We've got retail. We've got the next season coming. We're living in a world we might have 5 versions of World of Warcraft to play running concurrently. So the part of the question I want to change is, I have noticed as well this huge gravitational pull back towards the old vanilla days era is being really popular. You guys are working on a seasonal server. Hardcore really is about, it feels like day one again, a little bit, kind of. What are you guys taking on board from noticing that? And is it changing the way that the team sort of addresses Classic moving forward? Because I've been saying you guys are coming up to a reckoning point where you might lose a bunch of us. So what's happening?
Yeah, I can take a stab at this one. We talk about this a lot, and like there is definitely a danger of like almost too much classic and too many different ways to go. But the reason why we really like hardcore is that it's like I used the word evergreen earlier, and that's kind of how we feel about it, is that it's a perfect game mode that you can do between other things. There's no pressure to hit 60. There's no pressure to make your guild's first molten core run or whatever. You just play it when you feel like it and don't when you don't. And that's great. That's an awesome thing to have as a backdrop to, if you're actively raiding or PvPing in Wrath of the Lich King, or you're playing on modern WoW, it's a great backdrop to that. So that's something we think about a lot. And in terms of like, we look very closely about at the kind of the sentiment of like what players are wanting and into. And I think we learned a lot of lessons from the last server about like, what's the right amount of time to space out like major, like a refresh of vanilla or a refresh of something else. And so we've learned a lot of those lessons over the years, and we definitely feel like there's probably an ebb and flow there. And like whenever we have another season coming for a reason, and it's at the it's been a couple years at this point, and we're really excited to talk about that later. And we hope you guys really like it.
I was going to say, I hadn't noticed. It's been a couple of years, has it? It's all I can talk about. Is there anything you can say to tantalize us? What does later this year mean, Josh?
It means later this year. I can't wait. Like, dude, I'm telling you, I can't wait. It's going to be awesome to talk about it.
All right. I'll let you off the hook just begrudgingly. Sorry, Nora, and anything on that one before I let you guys go?
I think Josh said it beautifully. That lack of pressure that he mentioned brings the focus back to the journey, the adventure, the serendipitous interactions between other players in this incredible immersive online world that we've all come to know and love. That's captivated millions of players worldwide. So, I'm excited.
Beautiful.
Right.
Well done.
I think we have a heart out.
You go, guys. Thank you so much. It's been brilliant.
Nice to meet you. Thank you so much.
Bye.